welcome to It Happened in Grand Prairie. As we bring you the history of our city and some of the people that are important in having made that history and some that are making history this very day. And as we're approaching the Memorial Day holiday and celebration, we have decided that this would be just an appropriate time to bring some veterans forward. And this is our history tape number 457, and we're so delighted to have the Korean War Veterans Association incorporated, not the entire incorporation, but several members that are with us today, and I'm so pleased to welcome them, and I know that you'll enjoy some of the things that they're going to tell us today. First of all, I have on my immediate right Mr. Marvin Dunn, a Marine. Mr. Marvin Dunn, welcome to the set.
Thank you.
We're glad to have you with us. And next, in the center, Mr. Jim Hall. Mr. Jim Hall, we are really glad to have you today because you're the only one sitting on the dais that has been a prisoner of war.
Thank you.
Now, some of us have been prisoners of other things, but never of the war, and especially the Korean War that you're talking about. And finally, Mr. Jack Cooper, long distance, we welcome you, young man.
Thank you, Ruthie.
Thank you so very much, all three of y'all, for being here and helping us in Grand Prairie to help get acquainted with the Korean War Veterans Association. And I found several members of your organization at a very special coffee place up on Main Street in Grand Prairie, Texas, where I could get cards and find out about you all. And I've held you all in abeyance for those 2 months because I knew that with Memorial Day coming forward, it would just be an appropriate time for y'all to be here. So, with your permission, shall we begin with Jack Cooper? Shall we begin with Jack?
Good. Sure.
All right. Jack, tell us a little bit about the organization and something about, even though Jim Hall was on the founding board of that group, we're going to let you, since you're sitting on the far end as my anchor man.
Jim is shy anyway.
Yes, he really is.
Anyway, it's named after a World War II and Korean hero named Walter H. Walker.
All right.
In fact, you know, the Walker Boulevard in Dallas was named after him. He's from Belton, Texas, and he was in Dallas for a number of years. He was one of George Patton's right-hand men. It was called Patton's Bulldog.
All right.
And it's the chapter has been in service a little over a year. It's called the Walton H. Walker Chapter 215.
All right.
Korean War veterans.
How often do y'all meet?
We meet monthly over at the Martin Sprocket and Gear in Arlington, Texas.
Okay.
The two owners are veterans, and they are gracious enough to let us use their very nice facilities.
Yes.
And we also welcome the DMZ boys too from Korea that have duty on up on the DMZ.
Yes.
So it's a great group. We're all in our getting up in our years and what have you, but we have a good time, and we're always looking for new members.
Okay.
And
you're not young enough to be a baby boomer, so you're something else.
That's right. We are something else, especially this guy in the middle here. But anyway, I was in the Oklahoma National Guard.
All right.
And was mobilized in August of '51. So most all towns in Oklahoma at that time had a couple of National Guard outfits. And the reason we would join because we got $37 over 3 months.
Yes, that helped.
We would fib about our age and what have you.
Yes.
But then the Korean War broke out in June of '50, and then they mobilized the 45th Division, the Thunderbird Division, in August of '50. We trained in Camp Polk, Louisiana. Then they loaded up the whole division on 2 troop ships in New Orleans.
Yes.
We had the pleasure of going through the canal up to San Francisco. They refurbished. Then we went to northern Japan to train there until November.
Okay.
And then we relieved the 1st Cav Division.
All right, and you were in what part of the Army?
Well, I was in an artillery battery, a 105.
A 105 artillery
battery,
okay.
yeah. So the time we got there, the lines were pretty well stabilized.
Yes.
But these two gentlemen, they were over there when it was a little more hectic than what I was in there. But we were all over there about the same time, really. So,
okay. We're going to get back with you in a minute and let you tell us some good stories.
All right.
But we got to get to Jim right in the middle there. Mr. Jim, as a prisoner of war, we'd like for you to start out with where you started out in the service and bring us in about 3 minutes up to snuff.
All right. I was born in North Carolina and joined the Army And at 16 years old, I took basic training in Fort Knox, Kentucky, and from there I went to Fort Lewis, Washington, and I stayed in Fort Lewis, Washington with the 2nd Infantry Division for a year and a half before the Korean War broke out. And when it broke out, they told us we was going to Korea for police action. Well, you know, we all thought it was a big joke of a police action. We didn't know we were going over to fight a war as such. We thought we were going over to, you know, kind of with billy sticks, kind of get the civilian population to settle down.
Yes.
After we got over there, we found out it was a little bit different.
They gave you a gun?
They started shooting at us.
Yeah.
We went completely combat loaded, though, when we went over.
Yes.
And I went into Pusan in August 1950 and was on the Mariang Pusan perimeter and stayed there until the 15th of September. Then we started pushing north, and at the same time the MacArthur had made the launching of the Marines at Incheon and kind of cut off the North Koreans. Then we were just fighting our way up to meet the Marines. Then get up there, then one day they told us, we went into reserve, and they said, well, the next move we make from here is going to be back to the States, back to Incheon, to the troop ships, and go back to the States and regroup and go to Germany. And about 2 o'clock that morning, we got orders to move out, and we thought we were going to Incheon, but instead we went north, and we went into North Korea, and then we fought all the way up almost to the Yalu River that separates Manchuria and North Korea.
Yes.
We were about 15 miles, I guess, from our objective when the Chinese stepped into the war.
Yes, they did.
And when they stepped into the war, that our division was the holding division while the rest of them withdrew back. And we hadn't got our winter clothing in, and this was in October, November 50, and we hadn't got our winter clothing in, and it was cold. And then it got that winter about 40, anywhere from 40 to 60 degrees below zero.
That's kind of chilly.
That is. It was very chilly, and I had a field jacket on, was all of the clothing I had on. Then they would take, and the Chinese took, and they captured a whole slew of men. I mean, at different times, and I mean within that time frame, and it wasn't anybody all together at one time. It was just piecemeal, and then they put us all together and started marching us at night, and they'd hide us in the daytime from the aircraft flying over, and the only time they'd move us was at night from sundown to sun up. And I was captured on the last day of November, and I got into the POW camp that they kept me in April of 1951.
Okay.
And they fed us on the march about every 3 or 4 days and what we could swipe on the way up, or North Koreans didn't have anything to swipe from anyway, so food was kind of thin, and the people I was with started dying off, and then we got into the POW camp, and at one time it was over 2,000 people in that one camp, and it was about 1,500 of them died there in the POW camp, and they wouldn't let us take and say prayer over nobody. They made us sit out in a cold ground and listen to speeches by the Chinese communist, and they was trying to brainwash us to the communist way of thinking, and we would have to sit out and sing for our breakfast, sing for our supper, and listen to the lectures, and it was cold. It was, today I don't know how that I made it back, but the good Lord was looking out after me. I do know that. And
How long were you a prisoner of war?
33 months.
33 months.
Yes, ma'am.
And of all those 33 months, you were hungry and cold probably a good percent of the time.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, my. And what was the magic date when you were released from the prisoner of war camp?
The day I was released was August the 10th, 1953. And when they exchanged us at Panama John, then they took me, when we got back to our side, and that was the happiest day of my life.
Yes, yes. That's like almost wanting to kiss the ground of America when you get back on.
Well, I did kiss the ground of the docks there in San Francisco when we got off the ship.
You bet. Glad to be home.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, that's
But didn't
wonderful.
you give up one time, Jim, and they took you to a camp where you were...
Well, yeah, but when I got into the POW camp, I was nothing but skin and bones, and I got so that I couldn't turn over from my back over onto my side or even over on my stomach. And they had one certain compound down there. They called it Compound 39, and that's where when the guy got so bad that he couldn't move, they'd take him off over there and
just leave him.
Let him pass away. And they took me over there, and it was a colored sergeant that was in charge of that compound, and that man. Today, I thank him for saving my life, because he used to take and go out and scratch around where they had a little, the villagers there, they had a little old garden and everything, and get dried leaves and grass and everything else, and take and put it in a can and stew it up.
Yes.
And feed it.
Make you a soup.
And make us eat it.
Yes.
And it was 6 of us that actually lived out of that Compound 39. Then in June or July of 51, then the Chinese started feeding everybody. That's when they started the peace talks.
Yes.
Then nobody else died in the POW camp. It's funny how they were dying, you know.
Yeah.
All of this time, then until they started the peace talks, and then nobody else died, you know.
That's something, isn't it?
That tells you something right there.
Yes, it does.
That they didn't care if we lived or died.
Lived or died. Well, that is some story, but with your permission now, we're going to get to Marvin, the Marine. We got to give him a little bit of equal time. He's not going to have very much time, but come on, Marine Sir Marvin.
Well, I was a freshman in college in 1950 when North Korea invaded South Korea, and I was planning my college first year, and the war broke out, and I was reading the papers and listening over the radio, and I realized it was getting very serious.
Yes.
And so toward the end of 50 in December, 2 buddies and I we got together and decided we'd join the Marine Corps and delay our college and come back, and so we joined the Marine Corps in January of 51, and they sent us to California, and we went through basic training and advanced training there. And we finished our training the first week in July, and we aborted the USS Pickaway, a transport ship, and we arrived in South Korea, Busan, about the last of July. And I was assigned to the 1st Marine Division, 1st Regiment, 1st Battalion, Able Company. And they were, at the time, were in Hospital Reserve about 10 miles behind the enemy lines. in the Punch Bowl area of North Korea, about 45 miles north of the 38th parallel. And they were in reserve, about a 4-day reserve, about 10 miles behind the line. So we got a chance to meet everyone and sort of get acquainted. And I was really trained in mortars, but they didn't need gunners on mortars, so I was given a BAR, which is a Browning automatic rifle.
Yes.
And I was told to get acquainted with it in those 4 days, and I did. And so we relieved the 7th Marines on Hill 749. They were in the process of trying to take that hill. And my first combat, and I'll tell you, I had several thoughts, but approaching my first battle, I thought, I prayed to God. I said, I wasn't afraid to die. I didn't even think about dying, because at 19 you don't think you're ever going to die.
That is true.
But I said, I don't want to be wounded so badly that I'll be an invalid the rest of my life. That was my number one fear.
Yes.
And my second fear was I didn't want to be a POW.
Yes.
And that's why I admire Jim and all of those POWs so much,
You
because I think it takes a special mentality to get through something like that.
You bet.
And I wasn't sure I had it. So anyway, we relieved the 7th Marines, and it took us 4 days. It took the 7th, the 1st, and the 5th Marine 4 days to take Hill 749, and we had 800 casualties from those 3 regiments. And after that, we secured several more hills, and I ended up on 884, which was we were so close to the ocean I could see the ships out there with my binoculars, and on the east part of Korea, North Korea. And I spent 39 days up there, and before we were relieved and went back for a little, we got a hot bath, hot meals, not a hot bath, hot meals and a bath, and clean clothes.
Yes.
Because we had none of that on the line. And we did manage occasionally to find enough water to brush our teeth, but we'd not had a bath or anything. We all smelled and were dirty, so it didn't really matter. We didn't think about that. I actually went back after about 6 days in reserve. We were assigned to go replace the 5th Marines on Hill 812. And I was in the process of building bunkers. I was in charge of 10 men that had come over recently, and they didn't know much about the problems there. So I was assigned 10 men to go get logs to build bunkers for the year. This was the last of October. It was already getting cold, and we'd planned to set up a defense for the winter and not make any major attacks. So we were about 400 yards from the North Koreans at the time, and I had instructed my men to stay off the skyline, and because they would
stay down.
Because they would fire mortars and 75 recoilless and artillery at us, and I had about 3 small logs in my hand, I guess, and all of a sudden I heard something incoming.
Yes.
And I yelled to my men to hit the deck, and I no more than got it out of my mouth until it went off, and I felt like it probably hit my back pocket, because I went up about 8 or 10 feet in the air and came down, and I had shrapnel on my face, my eyes. I couldn't see. Didn't know how badly wounded I was, but I was
still alive.
Still alive, and I really thought that might be it. I thought, because I was in very much pain. And I remember very distinctly asking God, I said, God, let me live and be productive, and I promise you I'll make you proud of me someday. I didn't know what I'd do, but I thought whatever profession I went into, I would try to do that. And so I spent 7 months in hospital in California, Oakland, California. and went through 2 surgeries and 2 in rehab. And I was discharged in May of '51, and I entered college, and in 4 years I received my bachelor's and my master's degree in school in education and administration.
Now you were busy.
I was busy. I went to school on Saturdays and at night. Anytime the dean would let me go, I went.
Yes.
So anyway, I spent 34 years in Dallas, 20 as a teacher and 14 as an administrator. And I really feel that when I told God that I would try to do something, it was,
you did.
I think I did. I feel real good about it.
And we have this beautiful shadow box in front of us that Louis is going to show to run our credits over, and he may, there it is up on, now, isn't that beautiful? And that has your Purple Heart in it, it has your stripes in it, and a picture of you when you were...
That was 2 weeks after I was wounded, and it was in Japan. And I couldn't see, I could barely see the outline of the captain in the Navy that presented me the Purple Heart. He just approached my bed and said, I'm going to introduce himself, and he said, I'm going to present you with the your Purple Heart.
But you ended up with one wonderful eye, and that the Lord gave you a break, didn't he?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Oh, that is really wonderful. Well, it's just such a pleasure having all 3 of you all on the set today. I think we have about 6 minutes left, Louis says. Now, we really haven't let Jack talk very much, have we? But I have so enjoyed both of your stories, and Jack, you said you had something to do with fire equipment, and you knew our J.C. Swadley here in Grand Prairie, Texas.
Yes, when I got back from, I got back in the summer of '52.
Yes.
We had the GI Bill. Of course, it was $110 a month.
That
covered everything, though. Tuition, room, board, books, and what have you. So we had a lot of, peanut butter and crackers and beanie weenies and what have you. But I graduated in '57 from Oklahoma A&M. That's the last class of A&M to become Oklahoma State the next semester.
Yes.
So I got into the firefighting business, and with different manufacturers, selling chemicals and items for fire apparatus and what have you.
Yes.
And then, of course, that's how I met our beloved J.C. Swadley.
Yes.
And what have you.
Yes.
Then I spent my life pretty well, selling and training in firefighting equipment. I was a guest instructor at Texas A&M for a number of years.
Yes.
They have a 2-week school down there for volunteers and so forth. So it's been a good life.
All right, well, you got to talk a little bit about George Nelson Jr. because he's my Grand Prairian.
Well, I'm Grand Prairian too now.
I know, but he's my other Grand Prairian that we don't have on the set today. He doesn't have equal time with you birds.
He's going to give us trouble.
Yes, so talk a little bit about George.
Kind of a funny story. Of course, George is from Henrietta, Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And I'm from a little town about 8 miles from there called Prairie, Oklahoma.
All right.
And I used to visit with a family in Henrietta on the weekends, and there were 3 brothers. And it wound up that George lived about 200 yards from where, his family lived.
Y'all were long-time friends.
Well, no, we probably played rubber guns together. I'm not so sure. But we happened to meet over at the veteran, the Korean, chapter.
Yeah.
And we started talking, and he mentioned Henrietta, then I mentioned the Archer family, and so I'm sure that we've had to, get out in the woods and play and what have you. So.
Yes.
But we have coffee twice a week at Starbucks on Monday, and then, the brass bean on Thursday.
Yes.
And George is an important part of it. We try to control him as much as we can, but he's a great guy.
And who all meets with you at the brass bean and at Starbucks here in Grand Prairie?
Well, Jim here, of course. Right. Marvin made the first appearance Monday, but we have different...
You're bringing him in on the end.
Yeah, I'm kind of the promoter, you might say.
Yeah,
and what have you. It's just, in fact, George and I started it.
Well, now, who's the president of the organization now, the Korean chapter?
Well, that's a man named Dick Predmore.
Okay. We'd mention his name at least.
Dick Predmore is his name.
All right.
And then Marvin is first vice president.
Okay.
Then I'm the second vice president. And Jim, what's your title?
I'm a POWMIA officer, the quartermaster, and
And lots of other things.
Lots of other things.
Yes.
And when I got back from Korea, I re-enlisted in the Army.
You did.
And I stayed in for 21 years.
Yes.
I went to Vietnam in 67, 68.
Yes. All right.
And I put a tour in over there with the 1st Cav Division.
You changed then to the cavalry from the infantry then, didn't you?
Pardon?
You changed from the infantry to the cavalry then when you were in this...
It was the air cavalry, but I done the same job.
All right.
I was a forward
Okay.
observer, you know,
Okay.
and I called in artillery fire. And I was
And
out
when did
with
you
the-
get out of all of that?
Pardon?
When did you get out of all of that? When did you completely retire from the Army?
I retired from the Army in 69.
In 1969. What you been doing since then? You have 1 minute.
I drove a gasoline truck for Shell Oil Company and
Oh,
started
that's
off in Richmond, Virginia, and ended up here in Irving, Texas.
Irving, Texas. That's a good place, isn't it? So now you live in Irving, Grand Prairie, and where do you
No, I live in Arlington.
You live in Arlington.
I
And
live in Arlington.
Arlington. So we're overbalanced here. 2 from Grand Prairie and 2. That's all right.
Well, we're close enough that I can throw a rock over into Grand Prairie.
Yes, and not only that, you come to the Brass Bean to have coffee, so that counts a lot.
One thing, Ruthie, if anybody that sees this are interested in becoming a member of the Chapter 215.
All right. What's the magic telephone number?
Well, my number is 972-641-2642. Then I can get the information to them on directions and what have you.
Okay.
We'd love to have them, really.
And you meet where and how often?
We meet at a company called Martin Sprocket and Gear. It's
All right.
close to the...
All right.
And it's 1300 Sprocket Drive is what it is.
All right.
And we meet every 3rd Saturday for about 3 hours. We
Third
have,
Saturday at what time?
from about 1 o'clock until 4. We have
And it
coffee
costs
and donuts.
$35 a year to belong?
Right.
Okay.
That's national as well as local.
Okay, that's everything put together.
Mhm.
All right. Well, we have, in the 1 minute that we have left, I would like to thank all 3 of you all for your service for us, for all of the sacrifices, and we couldn't even pay you, even with all the pensions that you would qualify for all of the things that you've gone through and all of the many hurts, but you've done something real great for America, and I just hope people will remember that. And Grand Prairie is getting ready to do something to honor our veterans. We don't know what it's going to be, whether it's going to be big, little, or what, but it's going to be something. And so y'all just keep your eye on us and say a prayer for us, and we'll say a prayer for y'all. And this is Ruthie Jackson reminding you that history is as we live and do.